Welcome to the WILPF San Jose Third Friday meeting,
All right.
April 17th, 2026. We're delighted to have you as a speaker and to tell us about the program that you're passionate about and working forward. And we start our meetings with singing two songs by the Raging Grannies. And how this works: everybody but one person mutes themselves, and then everybody sings to their heart's delight as loud and as off tune or on tune as they would like to. And I will share I will share the song. Let me see if let me make them even bigger yet. Yes, there we go. Okay, and I'm going to share the song sheet. Are you with us, Craig?
Yes.
All right. Well, here's the song sheet. Can you see it? Is it a bit bigger?
It's a little bit bigger.
I think I can see it. Yes.
All right. So this is to the tune of the
The
Mar-
Marine Hymn.
the Marine Hymn. And now, who knows that? All right, Rowan. So that means everybody but Rowan, mute yourself, and Rowan's going to lead us. Okay, ready?
From all across the USA, the people rise as one to demand that Congress listens as we demand what must be done. We all want a true democracy where each person has a say. So we're rising up as one to build true democracy today. Oh, we won't sit idly silent while our youth are thrown in jail, and where only those with money are set free when they pay bail. And we want 9 judges on the bench who'll protect the American way. So we're rising up as one to build democracy today. We want money out of politics. We know bribery is wrong. So rig elections make us sick, so we're raging loud and strong. We grannies fought these battles. We'll keep raging night and day until every person has a vote and is welcome here to stay. Oh, it's time that Congress heeds our call to do the work that must be done, to end divisive fascist laws so we all can live as one. We grannies look to Lady Liberty as she holds her torch on high, and we demand a country free from fear, from tyrannies and lies. Yes, every person must be safe and free if democracy to survive. And that's the new one by Vicky Ryder from January.
All right. On to the next one. This is to the tune of Down by the Riverside, Down by the Riverside. Okay, grannies or anybody else stepping up want to sing this? Gonna go down and cast my vote down at the polling place, down at the polling place, down at the polling place. Gonna go down and cast my vote down at the polling place. Ain't gonna suffer fools no more. I ain't gonna suffer fools no more. I ain't gonna settle up. I am gonna settle up the score. I'll vote for peace instead of war. I ain't gonna suffer fools no more. The people's will you can't ignore. I'll vote for peace instead of war. Gonna go down and cast my vote Down at the polling place, down at the polling place, down at the polling place, gonna go down and cast my vote. Down at the polling place, ain't gonna suffer fools no more. I ain't gonna suffer fools no more. The law's for rich as well as poor. Clean government we will restore. I ain't gonna suffer fools no more. I'll raise my voice now, hear me roar. Clean government we will restore. Gonna go down and cast my vote. Down at the polling place, down at the polling place, down at the polling place, gonna go down and cast my vote. Down at the polling place, ain't gonna suffer fools no more. And those songs were chosen specifically for this event by our Raging Granny's song leader, and that would be Rowan. So thank you everyone for singing along. Hope you sang loud and strong. It is my pleasure this evening to introduce our presenter. So here's how this meeting goes, Craig.
All right.
It's 7:15, and we close the meeting at 8:30. You gotta give the Raging Grannies a few minutes at the end to sing a couple of songs and maybe have a couple of announcements. But that's sort of our timeline, and can I assume you have a clock, or do you need a timer?
I've got a clock.
All right then, we're in good shape. Tonight's topic is California Clean Money Action Fund. And our presenter is Craig Dunkerley, who is the South Bay coordinator for the California Clean Money Campaign. The California Clean Money Action Fund, in partnership with the League of Women Voters of California and California Common Cause, launched the campaign for the California Fair Elections Act, which will appear on the November 2026 ballot. The landmark measure will lift the ban on public campaign financing in California and help ensure that everyday Californians, not just wealthy special interests, have a meaningful voice in our elections. The California Fair Elections Act represents one of the most significant opportunities in a generation to make our elections more transparent, more competitive, and more accountable to voters. Now, Craig has worked with the California Clean Money Campaign as the South Bay coordinator since 2004 to bring campaign finance reform to California elections. He's also a member of the Santa Clara County Citizens Advisory Commission on Elections. And it's our pleasure to have Craig. And I just want to put a shout out to Amy for reaching out to Craig. Thank you, Amy. And I'm going to turn this over to Craig. There you go, Craig.
All righty. Well, thank you so much for that introduction. Very kind of you. So I thought I'd start with a little bit of the legislative history that led to this bill passing and the ballot measure going on this coming November's ballot as a result. Then I'll talk a little bit about why we need the Fair Elections Act. We'll go into a little bit of exactly what it will do. Talk a little bit about the broad support that it has from Californians. Also talk about some of the different types of public financing that have been already implemented by different cities in California, and some of the proven benefits of those public funding systems. And then we'll wrap up with public funding candidates can beat big money and how they've proven that already. So hopefully that sounds good to everybody. So we started this a couple of years ago. We had a bill that we actually started with. We decided that we would go with two bills, one in the Senate and one in the Assembly, both basically saying the same thing. And the strategy there was that if the bill got stalled in one house, then we'd have a fallback. We could maybe get it through the other house. As it turned out, our efforts were a little more successful than we had anticipated. We actually got the bill passed in both houses. And then, of course, each bill goes to the other house. Um, as it started through the different committees, they start with the elections committee in both houses, and then if it passes there, it goes on to the appropriations committee. The bill made it to the appropriations committee in both of the opposite houses, but both chairs of those, the chair of the Senate Appropriations Committee and the chair of the Assembly Appropriations Committee, thought the other one was going to pass it. So they're always looking for reasons to cut down on or limit the number of bills that they end up sending on to the governor, because he's literally got over 1,000 bills that he's got to review in September and decide which ones he's going to sign and which ones he's going to reject, and the reasons why, which they will put out an analysis on. So we thought our next step was going to be encouraging the governor to please sign one of those two bills. But unfortunately, we got stalled that year. That would be 2024. So we quickly arranged to have a meeting with the chairs of those two appropriations committees to find out what the heck went wrong. And we were able to get commitments from especially the assembly chair to that she didn't realize it was such an important bill. She didn't realize that it has such broad support. We had a whole bunch of Democratic Party elected delegates that were on that Zoom call conference that we had with her. And she said, my apologies. I'll be sure and support it next year when you reintroduce it. So we had to go back to square one, but we had reason to believe that we'd have a little more success this time. And so this time at the beginning of 2025, we started with just one bill, a Senate bill, SB 42. And it was essentially the same bill. As these bills move through the legislature, they get amended, they get revised. Different people will, could you change this phrase, or could you do that? Or I'm a little worried about whether if we did that, if this would happen, could you amend this? So to get the votes that you need to pass something, you go through a certain amount of revision as you go through the House. But we made it through the Senate very well. Then we moved on to the Assembly. We were, and this time with the support of that particular appropriations chair, we were able to get it through the Appropriations Committee. It went on to the governor's desk, and he signed it last September. So, as a consequence of that, and what the legislation did was simply to put this measure on this coming November's ballot. So, what the legislators were basically voting on was, would you be willing to put this measure on the November ballot in 2026 so that the voters can decide whether or not they want to pass this bill or not? Now, and this bill was I'll get into the more of the details of exactly what this ballot measure will do here in a second. But we might be wondering, you guys probably don't need that much persuading, but why on earth do we even need public financing of campaigns in California? Well, a few facts. The amount of money in politics is very corrupting, as we all know. Since 2020, over $1 billion has been spent on California state candidates alone. Now, in the national arena, $1 billion is, not that much. But for one state to have over $1 billion, that's 1,000 times a million. That's $1 billion spent on California candidates alone, and that massive fundraising rather, uh, essentially buys access for special interests through our elected officials. So by supporting and contributing to either the campaign or to a PAC or independent expenditure group that will support that candidate. By doing that, they buy access to that candidate to have their ear so that they can explain to them why there's certain kinds of legislation they want and why other kinds of legislation they don't want. It's not so terrible that interest groups want to lobby for particular legislation or against particular legislation. The problem is when money starts to get involved and when the candidates start to depend on that money in order to fund their campaigns. That's when we really run into a conflict of interest. California footnote here, California Clean Money Campaign, we are ourselves a lobbying group. None of us get paid. And the only reason we're doing it is because we think the things that we're arguing for have merit. And we attempt to persuade our elected officials based on the merits, of whatever legislation we're trying to get passed. So there's no money changing hands, and there's no money that is or isn't going to show up in that candidate's campaign fund if they vote in favor of us or against us. So that's essentially the deal. The problem is not lobbying itself; it's all the money that has a tendency to go along with that. Do Californians mind that all that money's showing up in all these campaigns? They do. 81% of California voters believe that big money contributions have too much influence over elected officials. So this is it's not a new idea or one that we're trying to persuade Californians of. It's pretty well common knowledge that there's just way too much money influencing our politics. There are five now. The public financing of campaigns, which I'll talk about a little more here in a minute. Um, Currently, under current law, is only permitted, that option to use public financing of campaigns is only permitted for what are called charter cities. Charter cities, generally speaking, are usually the ones that were around before California became a state. So San Francisco, LA, Berkeley, Oakland, there are a number of others. They're also typically the larger cities. San Jose is another charter city. And so these charter cities were sort of grandfathered in, and they're allowed to use public financing of campaigns. But because of a very sneaky ballot measure back in 1978, there was a provision that snuck into the law that said that nobody else, including the state itself, can use public financing of campaigns. So, we've got to the first step in encouraging various levels of government to implement public financing of campaigns is we need to lift that limitation, so that which is currently it's limited to charter cities, and we need to lift that limitation so that any city, general law city, any county, or the state itself, for that matter, would have that option of crafting a public financing system if they chose to. So that's what our bill will actually do, is lift that limitation. Um, the proposition on the November ballot will also put some restrictions on, or basic requirements for, what those public financing systems would have to be. So some basic ground rules on what your public financing system would have to do. It would require public funding candidates that they abide by certain expenditure limits. It would also set up some strict criteria for them to qualify for these funds. We don't want every Tom, Dick, and Harriet running for office just because the taxpayers are paying for it. So these systems have to have certain basic requirements that a potential candidate would need to meet. They have to show that they've got a reasonable amount of grassroots support for their candidacy. among the constituents that they're going to be serving. So not from anywhere else, but from the constituents you're going to be serving. And you also have to agree to the spending limits and that's the only money that you'll use in your campaign, including any money from yourself. So a publicly funded candidate, in order to qualify for public funding of their campaigns, they have to agree that they won't take any other money, even from themselves. So, for example, if my campaign is falling short, and I'm a publicly funded candidate, I can't suddenly loan my campaign a bunch of my own money because maybe I happen to be, rich or wealthy, or I can't accept a loan from anybody else, any other private party, to fund my campaign, and then either pay it back after the election or even worse, pay it back with the public funds that I was given. So all of that, all of those basic kind of common sense things are included in the ballot proposition so that yes, all the different levels of government in California will have this option, but there are certain basic requirements or ground rules that they'll have to follow. Now, before we started on this whole process, we did do some polling. We put together before the California voters some questions about would you support a ballot measure that would lift the limitation on public financing of campaigns? And the results were quite promising. Overall, 68% of the Californians who were polled, all of whom are registered voters, 68% favored the idea of making this option of public financing of campaigns available to all levels of government in California and lifting that restriction that's currently limits it to just charter cities. If you break that down by party, it's also interesting. 75% of Democrats favored doing that. 64% of independents favored doing that. And particularly interesting, I think, is that 59%, almost 60% of Republicans agreed that they thought public financing of campaigns should at least be an option for all levels of California government. So that was very encouraging. Partly as a consequence of that, we started our campaign. We're supported by our bill, of course, was sponsored by the California Clean Money Campaign, but we're also very pleased to have the co-sponsorship and support of California Common Cause, the League of Women Voters of California. It's also supported by the American Civil Liberties Union, AFSCME, the union, Asian Law Caucus, Bay Rising Action, California Environmental Voters, California Nurses Association, California Labor Federation, Courage California, the Dolores Huerta Foundation, Indivisible, and La Defensa as well as many others. So I don't want to go through the whole list. So we're very fortunate to have the support of virtually all the good government groups. Okay, so one way of summing up the attractiveness of public financing of campaigns was articulated by George Skelton, who was a commentator for the Los Angeles Times, columnist, and a quote that we like to cite in one of the articles that he wrote in April of 2023, about 3 years ago. He says, if the public doesn't finance political candidates, special interests will happily step in. So somebody's got to come up with the funds for these campaigns. And if candidates have to depend on special interest groups and big corporations or wealthy folks to fund their campaigns, then they're just by their very nature, they're going to be somewhat beholden to those sources of money. They've got to be a little careful how they vote. They've got a little careful about what they say. They have to be sure they don't offend the various people that are going to be funding their campaigns. On the other hand, if their campaign is funded by a nonpartisan, impartial public fund, now they just have to abide by the rules in order to qualify for that public funding, and they can spend all of their campaign time talking to voters. What a concept. talking to voters instead of having to spend maybe half their time dialing for more dollars to fund more of their campaign. And what we found from our experience is that one of the first things that a publicly funded candidate will want their constituents to know is that, oh, by the way, I'm not taking any special interest money from any big corporations or wealthy individuals. So if you do the honor of electing me, the only favors I'm going to owe are going to be to you, the voters. That can be very powerful, especially if they happen to be opposed by a privately funded candidate who's doing it the traditional way. Another little footnote here, all public financing systems have to be voluntary. Part of that is because of the First Amendment, but it's also part of what allows it to be approved by and pass muster with the courts. So a publicly funded campaign system has to be optional. So candidates can either opt in, and if they qualify, then they'll be receiving those funds. Or if they think they'd rather just do it the old-fashioned way and raise money the way it's always been raised in the past, they can opt out. They're not under any obligation to use the public system if they don't want to. Okay. Now, if our ballot measure passes and the public financing becomes an option for all cities and counties and the state itself, for that matter, what are some of the different kinds of public financing systems that might crop up? Well, here are some of the ones that have already been tried and have already proven to be successful. One is called a matching funds system. This is where donations from small donors are magnified by matching them with public funds. Los Angeles, San Francisco, and Berkeley all provide, as an example, they all provide 6-to-1 matching funds on small donations. And small donations are usually defined as somewhere between $150, maybe $175 or less. Different jurisdictions have different limits, but you want to keep it fairly low so that, once again, you're rewarding candidates for being able to attract relatively small donations as opposed to bigger donations. So the only funds coming from individual donors, small donations that will be given this 6-to-1 match from the public fund are those which are underneath that limit for small donations. New York City has a very similar system. They provide 8-to-1 matching funds on donations of up to $175. And this empowers small donors to compete with larger ones. It also allows them to have a fairly significant say in who's going to be the candidate and how that candidate's going to do. In a more traditionally funded campaigns like we have now, my $175, isn't going to buy much influence or have much effect on the campaign. But if I happen to like the publicly spirited, publicly funded candidate that's running, and I decide to contribute that $175 to them, now I know that that's going to be matched by this impartial, nonpartisan public fund on a 6-to-1 basis in the case of LA and San Francisco and Berkeley, or in the case of New York City, 8-to-1. So that's a matching fund system. That's one common way of doing it. Another way you can do it is what they call a democracy voucher system. This is where residents receive vouchers that they can give to candidates who agree to abide by the special contribution and spending limits. Seattle, for example, and Oakland provide 4 $25 vouchers to every adult resident, allowing everyone to help fund the candidate of their choice, even if they can't afford to donate themselves. So basically, what Seattle's system does is, like I just said, it gives everybody like a $25 coupon. You get 4 of these, and you can then donate those to whichever candidates you want, or you could give all 4 of them to just one candidate if you wanted to. And those candidates then have to collect a certain amount of those vouchers in order to qualify for the public funds. So that's a way for them to show that they have grassroots support for their candidacy, is that they can persuade a certain minimum number of registered voters to give them their coupons, their $25 vouchers. And one or more than one if they can persuade the voter to do that. So that's another way you can do it, and it's a way for even small donors who can't afford to donate any of their own money. Maybe the four $25 vouchers that they have is more money than they could even afford themselves, to be able to donate. But they still get to have a say in which candidate's going to do well and which candidate is possibly going to end up getting elected. Another way you can do it, what they call full public funding clean election systems. In these systems, candidates qualify by raising enough small contributions and then receive a public grant to fully fund their campaign, provided they raise no additional private funds. This system has been used for over 20 years, almost 30 years now, in Connecticut, Maine, Arizona, and also a variety of cities across the country. Albuquerque, New Mexico is famous for doing this. So this is probably the oldest form of public financing of campaigns, the full public financing of campaigns. So in California, for example, if the state of California had a full public funding system, let's say for the statewide offices, that would be all the executive branch offices like governor, lieutenant governor, insurance commissioner, secretary of state, and so on, and all of the assembly election officers and all of the senators. Let's say we had a public financing system in California that would cover all those elections. And let's say I'm running for assembly, or I want to run for assembly. I'm real public spirited. I think I've got a lot of good ideas. And I think I've got a fair bit of support in my community, in the district that I want to represent. So I have to go out and get a certain number of signatures on a petition to say that yes, we support Craig as being our candidate. And I'd also have to collect from them, for example, let's say a $5 contribution. If I can get a certain number of those signatures and a certain number of those accompanied with a $5 donation, if I meet that requirement, then I would qualify for public funding of my campaign to represent my district. I would also have to agree to the spending limits. I'd also have to agree that I would not accept any other money from anybody else except the money from the impartial, nonpartisan public fund. So that's the way that's been done, and it's worked really well. Arizona and Maine and Connecticut have been doing this, like I say, for over 20 years, almost 30 years now. There's another sort of hybrid version called full public funding democracy vouchers. This is a California Clean Money Campaign architecture that we've developed. It allows candidates to qualify for public grants to fully fund their campaigns without private donations by collecting enough vouchers instead of contributions. So as opposed to the matching fund systems where I get actual small donations from voters, and then those are matched by the public fund. In this case, it would be more like the Seattle system where if I collect a certain number of vouchers that have all registered voters in a given area are given these vouchers, and if I can get a certain number of those voters to contribute their voucher to my campaign, and I meet that minimum threshold, and I agree to all the other conditions, then my campaign would then be publicly funded. So those are some examples, and when we get to the Q&A, I'll be happy to answer more questions about that. Do public financing of campaign systems really work, or what are the benefits of these kinds of systems? Unfortunately, we have a lot of track record with this. It's not like a new idea that we theoretically think will work. We know this stuff works because enough other places have done it. So among the benefits are it tends to amplify the voices of everyday voters. and candidates with a viable alternative, and it provides candidates with a viable alternative to fundraising that relies on wealthy donors or special interests. So maybe I don't know any millionaires or billionaires, and I don't have wealthy connections, but I've got a lot of good ideas, and I think I've got a lot of community support, and I'd really like to represent, my community. It gives me an opportunity to do that, and it allows the voters in those communities to have much more of a say in who the candidates are going to be and who gets elected than they would otherwise. Because small donations, voters who can only contribute a little bit under our current system don't have much influence or effect on the ultimate outcomes. Another benefit is that it allows qualified candidates from all walks of life to compete and win. Public funding systems help qualified candidates run competitive campaigns, even if they aren't wealthy and even if they lack wealthy donors. Los Angeles now has the most diverse city council ever, with 14 of their 15 council members elected using their matching funds system. So that's another thing that has a tendency to happen, is that as elected officials, they get used to and they become familiar with this public financing system and how their particular system works. More and more of them decide that, to use it. They like the idea of having small donor support, broad community support for their campaign. And they really like the fact that they don't have to spend so much of their time dialing for dollars or trying to convince some wealthy person to give them a big chunk of money so that they can run their campaign. One of the few things in Sacramento that almost all elected officials on either side of the aisle will agree on is that they hate fundraising. It's really a pain, and it's really distracting. As these campaigns have gotten more and more expensive, they have to spend more and more of their time outside of their office because they're not allowed to campaign fundraise, inside their office. That's a conflict of interest. So they have to go outside of the Capitol to some prearranged phone room where they can spend an ungodly amount of hours of each day dialing for dollars to accumulate the money for whatever their next campaign is going to be. So they don't have to do that with these public financing systems. It also increases the diversity of campaign contributors. A study by MapLight found that during the first cycle of the matching funds program in Berkeley in 2018, donors to participating campaigns were spread across more of the city. A 2020 study from Georgetown University found that since Seattle began their democracy voucher program, the donor pool has become increasingly large and diverse. So again, it allows small contributors and even voters who wouldn't be able to contribute anything, from their own budget. It allows them to be more fully participate in their elections and have a more say in who the candidates are going to be and who will ultimately represent them. So that's a part of the problem we have now is that voters feel like their vote doesn't count because they're only one person, and who cares what I think? And it doesn't seem to matter what I think. The only people who seem to get paid attention to are the ones, donating zillions of dollars to these campaigns. This breeds cynicism, and it causes people to lose faith, in their elections and in their government. Uh, we say that, our biggest enemy, in our current election system is cynicism. And voters understandably, can get cynical about this because the money that isn't theirs and that they could never afford is having way too much influence. Now, can I give you some specific examples of candidates who have used the public financing system and succeeded? I can. So, for one, well, I'm sure we're all familiar with the New York Mayor Zoran Mamdani. He had over $40 million spent against him in the race for New York City mayor. And with just a very few $1 million from the New York City public financing system, he was able to prevail. Why? Because his message just resonated a lot better than the candidates that were supported by the millionaires and billionaires. So another thing we've learned along the way is that uh, if a publicly funded candidate is opposed, has an opponent who's privately funded, the publicly funded system doesn't have to give the publicly funded candidate dollar for dollar match with whatever the privately funded candidate is spending. You don't have to match them dollar for dollar in order to have the publicly funded candidate be able to run an effective campaign. You just have to provide them with enough money to to get their message out and to connect with their voters and to do the basic stuff that you need to do to run an effective campaign. But you don't have to match that independently funded candidate, dollar for dollar. Another good example is Karen Bass, mayor of Los Angeles. She had over $100 million spent against her by a billionaire who was running against her and trying to be mayor of Los Angeles. She used the public financing system, the matching fund system that LA has, and she was able to prevail. So, with just a couple $1 million from that publicly funded system, she was able to get her message out, and her message resonated a lot better than the billionaire's message did. And so, money doesn't always determine the outcome. It depends a lot on where the money comes from. And voters are keyed into that. They recognize that, especially if the publicly funded candidate brings it to their attention. Um, in Connecticut, another example here. In Connecticut, candidates for the General Assembly used public funds to seek office in 2018. As a result, 99% of their campaign funds came from real people. That was up from 49% before the Clean Elections Program. And Connecticut also ranked among the top states for monetarily competitive legislative races. So another example of how this system has worked well in Connecticut. And then going back to Seattle, democracy voucher candidates in Seattle beat millions that were spent against them. In 2019, Amazon and other corporations spent $2.6 million in independent expenditures opposing 6 voucher using candidates, but 4 out of the 6 candidates who were publicly funded won. So you don't always prevail, but you can prevail in a sizable portion, and in many cases, more often than not, you can succeed in getting elected, running an effective campaign and getting elected. I'm going to finish with one of my favorite stories from an Arizona insurance commissioner. This insurance commissioner was a Republican, and he had been the Republican majority leader in the Arizona State Senate. And when the bill for Arizona's public financing system came up in the late 90s, he was opposed to it. He thought, oh, this is a terrible idea. We're not going to spend taxpayer dollars, to fund campaigns. He didn't like it. And so he opposed it. But it passed anyway. And that's how Arizona got its public financing system. The voters, in response to a lot of corruption that had happened in the state of Arizona, passed their public financing system, based in large part on the model that they copied from Maine, a pretty blue state. So this head of the Republican Senate opposed it, but it passed anyway. Subsequent to that, he decided he was going to run for the state insurance commissioner. And he decided, what the heck? I didn't support it, but if the state's willing, if I can show I've got a certain basic amount of grassroots support, and the state is willing to help me fund my campaign, what the heck? I'll try it. So he did, and he won. So he ended up winning using the very system that he had originally opposed. But the best part of the story, I think, the part I like the best is where he said, after I got elected insurance commissioner, I happened to be walking through the Capitol one day and I saw, across the lobby there, this person approaching me, and I knew who this guy was. He was somebody from an insurance company, and I knew what he was going to do. He was going to try to put the arm on me to pass a certain piece of legislation or oppose some other piece of legislation. And it suddenly dawned on me, I don't have to talk to that guy if I don't want to. Because I'm not dependent on any money that his insurance company may or may not donate to my next campaign. And so the freedom and the to vote my conscience and do what I honestly thought was right suddenly dawned on me in the form of I don't have to talk to that guy if I don't want to. So anyway, I'll leave it there. Happy to answer questions, and I really appreciate your kind attention.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you. So much information. I took 2 pages of
I hope I
notes.
didn't bury you.
Well, I took a couple pages of notes, which is really good. I'm going to start off with a question.
Mhm.
They're publicly funded. So what is the public source of this funding?
Where does the money come from?
Right.
Yeah, so it's so I'll say a little bit about where the money can come from, and then I'll kind of wrap up with an overarching assessment. Um, the money can come from a variety of different places. Uh, in Arizona and Connecticut and Maine, the oldest public financing systems, there's a small tax that they put on usually big corporations, and they generate the money from that. In other cases, some jurisdictions have raised the money by taking it from the general fund. And depending on how much it's going to be, how much they will need depends on how many candidates decide to use the system and how much money, in small donations they bring in. So if they're using a matching fund system, then the amount of money that the government will need to supply, depends on how many small donations that candidate gets. The overarching thing, though, that I want to say is that wherever the money comes from, and this is unlike, I'll back up a little. There's so many really good ideas out there that for a wide variety of things where, we'll look at each other and we'll say, gee, that's a really great idea, but we just can't afford it. It costs too much. We just couldn't do it. It'd be great if we could, but we just can't afford it. But one of the beauties of public financing of campaigns is that it's unbelievably cheap. It's really cheap. It doesn't cost that much because there's so many of us and there's so few of the candidates who are actually running and who are going to need that money. So I'll give you an example. In let's see, it was in the later 2000s, so like 2006 or 2008, I think. We had our Proposition 89. It was one of our first forays into a full public financing of campaigns for the state of California. And that was going to be funded from the general fund. But we figured out that uh, even if every single assembly person and every single senator and the governor and the lieutenant governor and the secretary of state and the insurance commissioner and the controller and all the other executive branch officers, even if they all decided to use this public financing system, the amount of money we were going to need to cover all of those elections amounted to about $6 per registered voter per year. I mean, for the cost of a Starbucks and a muffin, you could buy back, the integrity of your democracy. So that's just one example. But in general, it's incredibly cheap. It doesn't cost that much on a per capita basis to fund these things. And but each jurisdiction will, with if our proposition passes, each jurisdiction will be able to determine, tailor make their system toward, how much do we want to provide, where are we going to get the money, who would be good to tax, and who wouldn't we? One other quick example in 2010, we had Prop 15, which was a very scaled down version of our Prop 89. It was to, if that had passed, it would have created a pilot program, which would have created a public financing system just for one office, the Secretary of State. Being the chief elections officer in the state, we thought that would be a good place to start. And then we could set up a system, do a pilot program. Everybody could see how it worked. We could kind of work out the bugs, and we could show everybody, how beneficial this could be by doing that. We got a lot more votes for that than we did for Prop 89, so we were going in the right direction in terms of generating public support, but it fell short by about 4% of actually passing. But for that one, we were going to fund it with a very small fee on lobbyists. So that was what was going to fund that particular program. And it once again, wherever you're going to get the funds, you're going to be delighted to find out that it won't take that much money. These systems also tend to pay for themselves because you get a lot less bad legislation and a lot more good legislation. So, for example, you don't get legislation that creates a lot of tax cuts for millionaires and billionaires and big corporations. You don't get tax legislation with a lot of loopholes in it. You don't get public policy legislation that funds boondoggles that benefit a few but don't benefit the many. And instead, you do get constructive, public-spirited, public benefiting types of legislation that pass. So over a relatively short period of time, the more publicly funded candidates you have, the more candidates who become elected officials who are represented by, who represent the general public and who aren't beholden to any particular private source of funding to pay for their campaigns, the better legislation you're going to get. And the lot better spending of taxpayer money you're going to get. It's going to get spent in the public interest a lot more than it does otherwise. So just all around the financial benefits and the financial wherewithal to fund these things is very, very doable.
All right. So I'm not a legal person. What does it mean? Each jurisdiction decides whom to tax.
Yeah, so each jurisdiction will figure out, let's say a small general law city, which didn't used to have the option of public financing of campaigns, but if our proposition passes, they would now have that option. They can get together and they can say, "Gee, I really like this idea of publicly funded elections." And we can fund it in a variety of ways. We could do it this way, or we could do it that way. Each local jurisdiction can determine on its own who they want to tax or how they want to generate the money. There's different and different localities have different ways of raising money. Some have property taxes that they can tap into, others have other fees and so on that they can use. So we leave it up to each individual jurisdiction to determine what would be best for them as a source for the relatively small amount of funding they're going to need to fund their public financing system.
So my city, let's say I live in Cupertino,
Mhm.
would then figure out how to do that. Then
Exactly.
does that
And
apply like to the county? So Santa Clara County
if
would.
Santa Clara County wanted to have a public financing system for their county officers, same thing. And of course, when these elected officials are figuring out where, what the source of the money is going to be, they have to keep in mind, how the voters are going to feel about that. So they're going to have to take into account, well, what would the voters feel okay with and what would they not feel okay with? And, what will the market bear, so to speak? and how much of a system, do we really want to implement? How much in the way of funding do we want to provide? They can tailor it to their own local needs and the wishes of their local constituents.
So does that mean like elect the election for for an office like senator to the federal government? That would require the jurisdiction of California.
Excellent question. This would not cover federal elections.
Okay, that's what
This
I.
only this only covers any the state of California itself or any city or county in California could benefit from the California Fair Elections Act, but it wouldn't affect federal elections.
So the electing my district representative who goes to Washington D.C. cannot participate in.
Can't participate. Yeah, they wouldn't. It's not a federal system. The federal government could pass public financing of campaigns. And actually, you may already know this. Have you noticed on your tax form ever since the Nixon administration, there's that little box that says, would you like to contribute $3 toward the presidential public financing system? And unfortunately, that system, it's never been updated. And so it hasn't kept pace with the cost of running an effective presidential campaign. And so the last time it was used was when John McCain was running against Barack Obama. Barack Obama decided that he'd be willing to use the public financing system, but they'd have to figure out some way to offset all the independent expenditures that still weren't regulated, and there was no way that the two campaigns could figure out how they could affect that, and so John McCain ended up opting into the presidential public financing system. Barack Obama opted out. As it turned out, McCain was able, the independent expenditures in favor of McCain were much greater than the independent expenditures that favored Barack Obama. Barack Obama had to raise the money for his own campaign to do that. But that was the last time that the presidential public financing system was used. Campaigns have since become too expensive, and it needs to be updated and broadened. Ideally, it would be so all congressmen and senators, and could use it. And once again, we'd all be, in our humble opinion, much better off, as a country, and our democracy would be a lot more functional, a lot better off if all of our elections were that way. But to answer your question, it would not affect federal elections.
So how would this public financing work with the rising costs of publicity and getting your word out and media and all of those things that are just escalating in an election?
So again, each individual jurisdiction is going to have to figure out, how much money do we need to provide? How much money does a candidate need to run an effective campaign, in our particular jurisdiction? And so we don't presume to try to tell, each local jurisdiction, how they should structure it, as long as they meet certain basic fundamental ground rules, kind of common sense ground rules. They can structure it, to fit their own local needs.
So I'm monopolizing the questions here. I have several more, but how about others? How about other questions? Raise your hand, unmute yourself, whatever.
Well, I was going to ask a basic question about the measure that's on the ballot exactly, and what people can do to help get it passed. And
Well, thank you, Amy. You can go to our website and you can sign our petition. You can also, and the more people who do that, we can show, for example, various elected officials all over the state why they should endorse this proposition, because their endorsement of this proposition will be very helpful. So you can reach out to your own elected representative, whether it's on the city council or the supervisor, a county supervisor, and encourage them to endorse this proposition if they haven't already. And you could tell your friends, you can let them know that this proposition is going to be on the ballot and why it's a good idea. And like I mentioned, you can go to our website. The website is caclean.org. California Clean Money Campaign is caclean.org.
Okay.
How
Thank you
about
for that
Will there
question,
be
Amy.
phoning and stuff like that, anything like that later on
We might,
doing
yeah.
elections,
Yeah, depending on,
puppet,
yeah,
helping, working on elections, getting out the vote and everything?
yeah. So as this evolves and as we see, for example, whether or not there's any opposition that materializes to this proposition, we'll be able to construct our own response to it. And so, for example, one thing that we've done in the past with pieces of legislation that we've worked on is, let's say that there's a particular assembly person or a particular senator whose vote we need, or whose endorsement of our proposition we'd really like to have. We can look into our database for all of our supporters who happen to live in that particular senator's district, and we, California Clean Money Campaign volunteers, can reach out to those people and ask them, as constituents of that person, to please get in touch with them and urge them to endorse our proposition. So that's kind of an example of something we might do. If we're fortunate and little or no opposition materializes, we might not have to do all that, but we're entirely prepared to do that, if reach out to our allies and do that if we need to.
Well, do you think there's going to be a lot of bad advertisement against it and
We
stuff?
don't we you never want to, you don't want to jinx it, but
Yeah.
we don't think so.
Uh-huh.
It's on the grand scale of things, it's a relatively innocuous proposition. It's not saying you should vote in favor of public financing of campaigns. All it's doing is saying we should at least have all jurisdictions in California have that option, as opposed to it being only afforded to charter cities. It's a relatively innocuous thing. Now, if it passes, and then as we move on to, uh, you know, uh, um, promoting public financing systems in specific jurisdictions and helping to get those implemented, we'll probably see more opposition that will develop. But this particular proposition, just lifting that limitation so that it's not restricted to just charter cities, we don't think there's going to be a huge amount of opposition to it. Yes.
how about other questions? We're coming up towards the end of our time. How about other questions? Anybody have a question for Craig? Well, I have one more, or I have
All righty.
several more, but let me just. Who is funding yesfairelections.org? Where is Clean California getting their money?
Well, we're all volunteers, so none of us get paid. And there's a very small amount of money that we need for things like the website, or things like that. But it's basically everything is donated. So yeah, we we're very poor. We're poor in cash, but strong in spirit.
All right. And are you doing lobbying?
Well, we did for the bill. We went to Sacramento for those 2 years, getting it passed and then having to start all over again and reintroducing the bill and starting again. So yeah, we go to Sacramento periodically and lobby for the bill. Go to different senators and assembly offices and encourage them to support the bill. So yeah, we do that periodically, as needed. At the moment, we've succeeded in getting it on the ballot, so we won't be needing to go to Sacramento anymore for the moment.
But how will you fund getting the word out for the election? It's notoriously expensive, which is the very thing we're talking about.
Well, again, if we don't have a lot of opposition, then hopefully it won't be so expensive. But probably the bulk of our money will probably come, well, it's certainly from donations, people that donate to California Clean Money Campaign on our website, but also the California Nurses Association is pretty well heeled. So if they were the
Oh,
principal sponsors for our Prop 89 in around 2008.
Oh.
And they also helped with Prop 15 in 2010. But if significant opposition rears its ugly head, we think the nurses will undoubtedly help.
But don't we ourselves donate a lot? Each
Well,
member.
yeah, as members, I donate monthly, and a lot of our volunteers do donate monthly or make individual one-time contributions. But that money, any money that we do collect in that way, we do spend to support our campaign.
And you are a 501c4?
Yes, there's a 501(c)(3), which is the California Clean Money Campaign. That's and we do our educational outreach through them. And then the California Clean Money Action Fund is a 501(c)(4).
Okay. And that's all clear on your website.
Yes, yes,
Great.
yes.
Okay. Well,
And full disclosure, contributions to California Clean Money Campaign, the 501(c)(3), are tax deductible. Contributions to the California Clean Money Action Fund, the 501(c)(4), are not, because that's an official political organization.
right. We've gone a minute over. Oh dear. Oh dear.
Am I going to turn into a pumpkin?
No, no, no. It's just me, and I like to do things on time.
Alrighty. Well,
It's
thank you so much again for having me. I really appreciate it. And I apologize for being distracted and not getting on right on time.
You were on in time enough. So let's give a
Yeah,
big
you were on
hello,
time.
internet.
Thank
Thank
you. Thank
you.
you.
This is wonderful.
Told you 8:30, but we really meant 8:15.
Alrighty. I'm going to leave you. You guys take care.
Okay.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank
so
you.
much.
Thank you.
All
Whoa,
right.
that was fast.
And Amy, here's to Amy for getting Craig to come and speak to us. Can you see us all with our hands in the air clapping, Amy? I hope so. It was a very
Yes.
informative and dynamic speaker. And Amy, you're right on. Thank you so much for getting us
And
this speaker. All right, so we've got two songs left, and you know what one of them is. You always know what one of them is.
and you wrote the other one, so I'm hoping you'll sing it.
All right, it's to the tune of Where Have All the Flowers Gone? Where has all the money gone? While we were working, where has all the money gone? We want to know. Where has all the money gone? Gone to billionaires each one. When will we ever learn? When will we ever learn? Where did all the billionaires go? While we were working, where did all the billionaires go? We want to know. Where did all the billionaires go? To the inauguration, everyone. When will we ever learn? When will we ever learn? What did they do in Washington while we were working? What did they do in Washington? We want to know. What did they do in Washington? All those tech bros, they kissed ass. When will we ever learn? When will we ever learn? What did kissing ass get them while we were working? What did kissing ass get them? We want to know. What did kissing ass get them? Lots of perks for billionaires. When will we ever learn? When will we ever learn? Where did perks for billionaires go while we were working? Where did perks for billionaires go? We want to know. Where did perks for billionaires go? Not to workers, not a dime. When will we ever learn? When will we ever learn? We know where the money went while we were working. We know where the money went. Now we know. We know where the money went. Gone to billionaires every dime. When will we ever learn? When will we ever learn?
When we make peace instead of war, when we make peace instead of war, how I want to be in that number. When we make peace instead of war, when corporate rule is history, when corporate rule is history, how I want to be in that number. When corporate rule is history, when Congress speaks for you and me, when Congress speaks for you and me, how I want to be in that number. When Congress speaks for you and me, when everyone is fairly treated, when everyone is fairly treated, how I want to be in that number. When everyone is fairly treated. When we make peace instead of war, when we make peace instead of war, how I want to be in that number. When we make peace instead of war.
Good
Wonderful.
job.
Yay. Wonderful, wonderful. All right, we're 6 minutes over. We're done. Thank you for coming to the third Friday WILPF San Jose regular meeting.